The Daily Mail is reporting Trump says U.S. will take over Gaza Strip with troops if necessary. President Donald Trump outlined an extraordinary new plan for the Middle East on Tuesday, with the United States taking control of the war-torn Gaza Strip while its Palestinian population is moved to neighboring countries. It is the latest evolution in his plan for rebuilding a territory devastated by Israel. His words will sow fear in the Palestinian population, but Trump insists it was time for a new way of thinking. I don't know that other countries, the surrounding countries, are going to be receptive to the idea of taking in Palestinians. And the reason I say that is because there have been there've been multiple opportunities where that was on the table, getting Palestinians out of Gaza. People that are opposed to the Palestinians leaving, they would consider that a genocide. They would say, that's part of the genocidal plan, because if you remove a people from their land, that they'll consider that a genocide. I don't know that it's an actual viable option, but Donald Trump is a guy that'll just try some S and see how it goes.
It's an old war tactic. They call it repopulation. If you look up repopulation, I mean, it's literally like something you would do with a defeated population, as you would take them and you would ship them off to a different Siberia or something. You'd repopulate the people, and it's a pretty horrible thing to do to people, but, so is blowing them up. And, ultimately, I think Trump wants to build hotels. He's probably like, it's a beautiful area. We're going to have the most beautiful Gaza Strip the world's ever seen. All we got to do is move all the Palestinians. And I know Egypt is maybe as recent as last week said they don't want them. So yeah. I don't know.
Nobody wants them. And I certainly think, obviously, this story's just breaking. And obviously, President Trump is the master of the art of the deal. I think, like we saw with the tariffs, sometimes the broad, bold proclamations, they're not actually the thing itself, right? It's sort of a leverage or a mechanism to bring about some other form of change. But I think the only thing that I would certainly stick to my guns on would be absolutely zero Palestinian or Gazan, whatever you want to call them, refugees coming in to the United States. And I don't know, maybe we should turn it into just the world's largest gas station, the Gaza Strip.
I'm in agreement. The United States should not be taking in anyone
a McDonald's
from Gaza. I mean, I don't.
Tower.
I think no matter what. Well, what do you think, Chris? Do you have strong opinions on what the U.S. and whether or not the U.S. should be even involved in the situation in Gaza?
Of course not. Of course not. I don't think so. But I mean, this is another example of Trump being a bloviator. I mean, I think that he's serious about this policy, but I don't know what the details are going to be, and he's not strong on details up front like this. So I'm curious to see actually how this is going to play out. What does he mean that the U.S. is going to seize control of it? Are we going to send in troops and then have the troops forcibly remove Palestinians to countries that don't want them? Like, how is this going to play out exactly?
I think it'll be interesting, too, to see how the mainstream media latches onto this. As someone who watches way too much MSNBC as they try to grovel and have their sort of... I actually love it. There's struggle sessions about, how to cover Trump, because I think they recognize the sins sort of the first administration, where the resistance movement was sort of, I think, too overly engaged, right? Too many protests. They sort of took the bait on every single thing that President Trump did. So there's a conscious effort, if you watch their shows, that they can they're like, we don't want to take the bait on everything, right? We're going to cover what he does, not just what he says. So I'm curious if this will sort of, pass muster or be something that they will actually want to cover. I think they will, but if they do, then I think that's sort of brilliant. Not that I necessarily think the press over what's going on at USAID is bad. I think most Americans don't want to be sending our tax dollars to foreign countries.
That's some of the best press for the president and the administration.
But I think that this will sort of, again, it's flooding the zone. I know the media always says it with a pejorative connotation. I think it was Steve Bannon who sort of originally said that, but flooding the zone is how you keep these people on their toes in the same way that they're doing with the confirmation hearings, right? Just jamming these people through. Congrats to Pam Bondi for just getting through as we were going to air.
Breaking news.
So that's what I mean. I feel like these stories are not isolated things, right? They have, I think, obviously a geopolitical significance, but there's also sort of an evolving information warfare landscape in terms of just flooding the zone. So I say go for it.
Yeah.
They're also flooding it on the weekends, which is kind of new. Elon particularly doesn't want to take weekends off. He said that it's as if you're playing a game against somebody and they just sit out the game for 2 days a week and you're able to get 2 days ahead of them. So the zone is flooded come Monday. And I guess that is kind of what they're doing. is they're just doing as much as they can, as fast as they can.
I think Joe Biden made that very easy for them, right? There's so many EOs that they could overturn. There's so many problems that they needed to fix. But I think also, too, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, with the FBI stuff, but they essentially have no really meaningful form of resistance coming from a governmental perspective, right? There are no levers or institutions of power that they control. So the concept that they've sort of come up with is both civil society, of which media is sort of a crucial component to that. So that's why I think their sort of conception of how they push back against stories like this, it's so focused on how the media is going to cover it and engage with it. Because what are they? I mean, all these Democrats are standing on the steps of USAID, giving these like weak, disgusting, groveling, dysgenic statements while they're standing there like, we're going to win. It's like, no, you're groveling on the steps of USAID. How far you guys have fallen.
I mean, the reason that they're on the steps of USAID is because they're in such complete disarray. If they actually had, cogent strategy and actually had a base that was behind them and had policies that they were looking to implement, and if they actually had any semblance of power, they wouldn't be just sitting out on the steps saying, oh, we're going to stop Trump. Yeah. They've really made it their goal to just be the resistance almost again. It's just, if Donald Trump says we're going to do this, or he wants to do this, they're going to automatically say, no, this is a bad thing. They're coming out against, waste, fraud, and abuse, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's never, like, the American people are, even though waste, fraud, and abuse are amorphous and really ambiguous terms, the American people are never against getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. Those are ubiquitously bad things, according to, the American people.
I think the waste, fraud, and abuse paradigm is certainly valid, and obviously we don't want to fund the transgender musicals in Kazakhstan or whatever.
And I think the American people look at that as wasteful.
But I think that the Elon Musk angle too, I mean, if you look at what he was tweeting about, they sort of started off this whole thing by talking about how USAID was funding the COVID gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I think there's a much darker and more sinister underbelly to what USAID has been doing. It's not all just, woke drag shows. It's frankly trying to destroy the United States. It's weaponizing, whether it's the censorship stuff. But to the point that you were making, I think, about these Democrats sort of standing out there, they went from trying to impeach President Trump every single day. And I would argue that's what they're laying the groundwork for being able to impeach him should they take back the House 2 years from now. But I also think that why they're so triggered about the USAID removals, if you go back, there's this coalition, it's called Democracy Forward, and it's sort of the new hotbed of Resistance 2.0. It's a collection of 120 plus far left activist groups like the Mark Elias types, the Norm Eisens. And the one thing that they did before President Trump was sworn in, they set up an institution called Civil Service Strong. And it was basically like a response crisis network for a lot of civil servants, saying that hey, this is how you can be a whistleblower. This is how you can sue. This is how you can stay in your job if you're being pushed out. And I think that they really wanted to have effectively embeds, right, within all these agencies. They wanted to be able to whistleblow. They wanted to be able to leak, using the media as an outlet to do that, because that's really their only path for resistance. So that's why they are melting down so intensely over this USAID removal stuff. In part, it's about the USAID stuff, but more broadly, I think the variable is that they're realizing that they're not even going to have the ability to leak because they're not even going to be inside those rooms.
Yeah. So I want to get back to the situation with Gaza, and we're going to go to Timcast News. Said President Trump says he sees the U.S. having long-term ownership of Gaza. So we get this clip here.
Territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle. And it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Bibi?
I mentioned again tonight our 3 goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea. And I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history. And it's worthwhile really pursuing this avenue.
This is a terrible idea as far as I'm concerned.
The more he actually talks about it, the more insane it sounds.
Like what they would have to have U.S. If they set it up as a U.S. territory first, that would be a territory, and then maybe they would vie for statehood if they wanted.
I don't think that's actually what they would end up doing. I think that you're not going to make a state in the Middle East. It might be like you might have U.S. forces there, but the goal is put U.S. forces in there, probably get rid of the Palestinians, move them out to somewhere else, and then eventually have Israel take back the Gaza Strip. That's what I hear them talking about. I don't. It's not going to be. You're not going to make. You know,
like
like
Hawaii and the East.
Yeah, you're not going to have the congressmen or Congress. You know, the senators from Gaza. That's not.
But I tell you, man, it is the horrible thing about it is if there's American troops there and then there's some sort of attack, like rockets come in from wherever, maybe Iran, so to speak. Maybe we think it's like, oh, how lucky for us that we get to invade. We have casus belli to go into Iran. Like it's just what a vulnerability to put Americans right there. That is like maddening. Now, the reason I said last year we should make Gaza the 51st state, truly it was like, what's the least worst outcome for stability? Like, it's like looking at someone that's suffered a traumatic injury being like, we're going to need to amputate their arm. This is the moment when they're like, all right, we do need to amputate. And it's like the blood is draining out of my stomach thinking about like, we have to do that now. Like accepting that moment of like, yes, we're going to have to amputate. Like it's horrific. And the person getting the news, it's like, but if you don't amputate, the whole body dies. So that's kind of.
But originally, what Trump said was, what he said was, finish the job. That's what he told Bibi. You know, I didn't know that the unspoken part of that was finish the job, so we can go in and clean it up and claim that territory and like station up in the Middle East, and it's permanent, it's permanently occupied. Like
ownership.
I don't understand this.
Said ownership.
Yeah, he's going to own it.
Yeah,
Long term.
I don't see how that in any way is a positive for the United States.
Well, he is making bold moves. Like just since he's taken office, he is like really staked his reputation on making bold moves. This is a bold move, and I can appreciate that, but it's also, I think, insane.
Yeah, I mean, just like like Ian was saying, that the idea of having American troops there almost guarantees further war in the Middle East.
I tell you though, in 50 years, it's going to be beautiful.
No,
it's going to be gorgeous real estate.
Can't get much worse.
No,
that's true. Yeah, it can't get much worse.
Look, if the United States were to do this, it absolutely will lead to war with Iran.
And Bibi would love that.
Yes, Bibi would love that.
Yeah.
I don't see any way around that, right? Like the Iranians will fire missiles into Gaza. They fired missiles into Israel already. They'll fire missiles at Americans in Gaza. Americans will die. The United States will look at that as, we're going to retaliate. It likely would happen during Donald Trump's presidency, if it does happen, and he would retaliate. It is possible that another president would pull them out, but if you set up an American base in there, presidents don't like to close down American bases. They don't want to do that at all. So like, I don't see any kind of sane policy coming out of this. This is the first thing that Donald Trump has done where I'm just like, this is absolutely nuts, and I have no idea how this would work.
I just don't know if it's actually about Gaza in the sense of, I think it's sort of like the tariff paradigm, right? It's asserting, I think, United States power or global hegemony that we haven't for a while. I don't really think that President Trump, who I think it's not necessarily expansionist, I mean, not to go with the mainstream critique of him that he's, more, nativist or kind of just folk protectionist here at home. But I think in the same way that he's using this, like, or how he used the tariffs, right, to get Mexico to put 10,000 Border Patrol agents. He used the tariffs to get, $1.9 billion from Canada. I think you guys are taking the bait, like the mainstream media. I don't think it's really about this. And I'm sure it will resolve itself. I don't think, even... I think I was a little hesitant about Marco Rubio at first, right, given his kind of neocon past. But I do think that what he was talking about, right, sort of this rules-based international order, the idea that we're the world's policemen, I think there's a very firm rejection of that coming from the White House. We're shutting down frickin' USAID. I don't think a same administration that's shutting down USAID is about to start adding or annexing a 51st state. So I would say give it like 2 days, and I think it will resolve itself.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear where this goes because
I'm curious if he told Netanyahu too. Like it just seems like Trump just kind of said it, which honestly kind of mad respect, telling not just China, Canada, Mexico, but now you're telling Israel, like, hey, actually long-term ownership. That's extremely bold for any president to do. I don't think that historically that's ever been done, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. But it's negotiating from a position of strength. And I think it's just something we haven't seen in a while. And it's narrative shattering, shall we say.
What do you think he wants?
I don't know. I guess I'll have to ask President Trump in the briefing room.
That does sound like a pretty good idea, seeing as you're going to be going to be in there in the next week or so. Make sure you ask him, hey, what's the end goal here? Are you just looking to have more resorts? You're looking for like a Trump Tower in Gaza? Is that the goal?
Yeah, I think that is what he wants. He wants one in North Korea, too. He keeps talking about it. He's like, they have beautiful...
I would say we should build a Hooters because I've been told dress like a hostess at Hooters.
That was horrible.
The White House.
Well, maybe it's an extreme ploy to guarantee the bombing stops.
That for sure.
I don't even think that's the bombing's going to stop, though.
But I wonder if the protesters outside the White House are getting more mad or less, like what the reaction is to this.
The reactions on X, I'm seeing like far left socialists, I'm seeing libertarians, and I'm also seeing people that are new to the MAGA movement being very angry about this.
But you're saying he's doing this will basically make Israel stop bombing.
If they're there, if U.S. takes that over, then Israel's not going to bomb the U.S. So maybe that's the crafty ploy.
That's why I said we need to make it the 50. It was like that was just an extreme way of making Israel stop bombing it.
Hey, you put it out there, man, and it just like hit him somehow.
Unreal.
You're responsible for this, is what I'm saying.
And then liberate it. But talking about repopulating the people is like, whoa.
Well, you're going to have to. I don't know that you're going to have to, but if you leave the people that are in Gaza, the Palestinians that are in Gaza, they're not just going to assimilate. They don't consider themselves American. They're not going to be Americanized. They're not going to be Westernized. They're not going to hate Israel less. I think that it's pretty clear that when you do polls of the people of Gaza, they really, really, really hate Israel. And I don't think that having the United States go in is going to make them feel differently about Israel or differently about the United States. I don't think that there's no way that I could conceive of this being the United States being looked at as liberators or anything. It's definitely swinging for the fences. All right.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.